Give us a takeaway, Siobhan.
Well, the obvious one is Andrew Holness has cemented his legacy as one of the greatest leaders produced by the Jamaican Labour Party, accomplishing what has only been achieved by one other prime minister in the country's history. That's the obvious one. The country also has an enviable competitive electorate. While securing a third term, the victory was achieved on a much reduced majority in the House of Representatives, which will keep the administration on its toes. However, that comes with the caveat that the voter turnout must be addressed. Coming from highs in excess of 80%, a modern democracy producing governments on the backs of less than half the electorate is a point of concern. This makes issues such as voter intimidation and bribery a more prominent and potent tool, particularly when you analyze seats like Southeast St. Mary and Central Kingston. What minimal cost would it be to any political operative to overturn an election decided on a margin of just 10 or so votes? The voter list itself also needs to be scrutinized, and the ECJ needs to be provided funding for an immediate re-verification exercise, an exercise which I believe should now become routine and carried out at least every 2 to 3 elections, depending. Well, that being said, with the low turnout, it's clear the number of end quote safe seats continue to dwindle across the country, which bodes well for the body politic and requires both the government and the opposition to properly address the needs of a wider cross-section of the Jamaican people to secure electoral success. On that matter, the GLP government has also now become a victim of its own success. It can be said without doubt that the Holness government has made significant achievements at the helm, so much so that issues such as the country's debt, overall macroeconomic picture, crime, have been diminished in the overall electoral zeitgeist of the country. However, it's clear from that reduced seat count in the lower house that Jamaicans are seeking even more significant returns from any incumbent government. There's a need for the government to ramp up the pass-through to the Jamaican people if it has any hopes of securing an unfathomable fourth term. All in all, the election result, I'm sure, will change the political realities in the country going forward in ways that I doubt even the most seasoned political pundits will be able to predict. But as with most things, time will reveal all. So those are just my short, very short understandings of what took place this Wednesday and what is to come over the next 4 to 5 years. Can you imagine our next election is in 2030?
Yeah, it is a key election. It's a key time as well. I had expectations for 2030 from all the way back in 2023, because in 2030 the body politic will change significantly, because the issues, I suspect, will also change significantly. As you noted earlier, the reduction in crime, the stabilization of our economy, and now looking at that pivot that the Prime Minister announced last year to growth. If that growth is to be achieved, if it is indeed achieved and people feel the benefits of that, if we have, greater spread of benefits across the society, if we have, better jobs, if the minimum wage is increased as touted, as announced, if all those things are to come to pass, Siobhan, we're going to see a different electorate. And as a matter of fact, what we will see as well is a new slate of candidates. Now we have a lot of new candidates coming in, particularly from the opposition. We have, do we have much from the government? No, not really.
Well, they're new in terms of to the House of Representatives.
To the House of yeah. Well, Delana Seif, right? Who else do I have from the government? But not as much. Delroy Williams, but not as much from the government, because the government really had to retain a lot of seats. But the opposition have come in with some new candidates, a lot of new faces coming in. Nikisha Burchell, etc. Well, Steve McGregor, if that count holds. And when you look at those new faces, you can expect, even on the governing Jamaica Labour Party side, that in 2030 there may be new candidates. And that's something that you can also expect from the opposition, because there are some politicians who believe that now they're going to be, stepping away from the politics, and that would see the change, similarly to how we saw that Mike Henry has now stepped away, Carlson Muda has now stepped away. So 2030 will be a different year, Siobhan. It would be a year when I expect that we would have performed well, and then if both parties are united at that time, it will be an even more competitive election. That is something that I'm excited about, because that is something that says that our democracy is strong. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on the point of the list itself being cleaned up, because if the list is cleaned, especially as it relates to those who would have passed, then we can see what the actual voter turnout is, because now you take that number and you do take it with a grain of salt, because there are a lot of people who came up publicly and say, well, I shouldn't be on the list, I've migrated, I'm there are persons in my family that have passed and they're still on the list. So yeah, I want to see where it goes to. And I agree about this, as I see it in the chat, electronic voting, etc. We need to improve that part of the system as well, Siobhan. I didn't say it publicly. Well, probably I did, but I was in the line for about 2 hours and 30 minutes with probably 10 to 15 people in front of me. I don't understand why I had to be in line that long. I was in line with much frustration and agitation because I had other things to do. It threw my entire day off being in the line that long. I know the director of elections came out publicly and said all went well and there were some issues here and there, but I don't see why I need to be in line that long. You know the numbers, you know the people are coming out to vote, you know the process. I don't understand. When I was at UWI, voting in UWI election, Siobhan, it was a much faster process. I don't understand. But, it is what it is. And I hope they improve significantly on that, because I don't want to wake up at 6:45 or 6:30.
Remind me, when was the EV system put in place? That was for the 2000 and something election. Which one was it?
Somebody told me recently, but it didn't work out. Yeah,
but isn't it strange that system has not really been expanded further throughout much of the constituencies? It still remains a very small number of polling divisions that actually utilizes the EV system.
Yeah,
it's strange considering how long it has now been in place.
I think they had some issues with it based on a conversation I was having, and Erica Bennett is saying I should get the information first before I criticize. No, Erica, I'm going to criticize. You weren't in the line with me, and I am going to criticize. It is my right to criticize, and I'll criticize. Oh wait, 15% in a line, 2 hours, 30 minutes. No.
And that's strange because my experience was quite the opposite. I think I was in there wasn't even a line. I was in and out within 2 minutes. In fact, when I went into the polling station, the indoor agents were asleep, which clearly suggests to me that they weren't exactly seeing much traffic at the time. They were asleep.
Well, you're a lucky one. I guess you're PD, Siobhan. They didn't have as much people at the time that you went, so you're a lucky one. And I was there pretty early. I wasn't there 7 o'clock on the dot, but I was there about 8. So to be there at 8 and then ending at roughly 11:30. 11:30 something going 12. That's absurd. No, nobody can bully me into saying that's not absurd. That is absurd.
When I went to Northeast St. Andrew, where Mark Golding was voting, Mark Golding was in and out within about 5-6 minutes, and he was not at the front of the line.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So there are spaces, and I can tell you, because I also, for those who are saying I need the information, I spoke to other election day workers that were saying, well, but we moved really quickly, but what I experienced, I don't think anybody should experience it. That is my point. But
And even so, you're relatively young, so that's fine if you have to sit through it. My concern is more the elder Jamaicans
right. There were
who
elderly
don't
people
have that
there.
level of patience or just fortitude to stay in a line for such an extended period of time, and that's something that needs to be addressed. I think both political leaders pointed it out, and it is something that the EOJ, ECJ needs to look to in terms of future elections to fast track the process, at least for those senior voters.
Yeah, you have a PD with a bunch of voters, and before I take the break, Mr. King, I have a PD with a bunch of voters, and I'm going in there. There's one person that's writing so slow, and then somebody that's I had to tell the officer that, hey, you don't have to read it to me. Just give me the ballot. I've been here for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Let me go and vote and leave, please. I had to say that, and it took too long, and elderly people were there. So of course my concern was even greater because elderly people were there in front me, behind me, and then the struggle. Some people with their walking stick, Siobhan, and we're there. So I'm pretty sure they're there for like 3 hours and 30 minutes because some of them were behind me, and it was a standing line. There were no seats or anything like that. So yeah, but that's all the time we have.